Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Overview and Scrutiny Commission meeting of the 21st of July. I'm Councillor Russell, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you're unable to use these stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you will be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. The link to this is included in the agenda. Please note there is no comments function available as part of this webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during the webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber, they are consenting to their image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and/or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room, as this shows what is being recorded and the webcast. You can request to speak as usual in the committees by raising your hand, to speak by pressing the button with a face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. Now, with regards to tonight's business on the agenda, further information has arisen since the publication of the agenda, and item 10, disposal of a council property, has been deferred from both the meeting and the Commission and subsequent Cabinet until September to ensure that all information is available. The report is still under OSC referral, and as a result, I've agreed that the OSC will consider this report at its meeting on the 1st of September. We'll now start the meeting with apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence?
No, Chair. I think we're all here.
Okay, brilliant. Disclosures of interest and whipping declarations. Are there any disclosures or whipping declarations? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I declare a personal interest on item 6 as a member of West Sussex County Council and Cabinet member for Public Health and Wellbeing.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 6 as well. I'm an NHS Sussex Healthcare Trust Public Governor.
On to the minutes. Our minutes of the last meeting held on the 23rd of June approved as a correct record. As a reminder, these contain Part B items. Are they agreed? Agreed. Okay. On to public question time. Public question time, and we only have one member of the public here tonight, and he's confirmed he doesn't actually have any questions for us. Okay. On to reports. We will now move on to consideration of the first report on tonight's agenda, which is the Corporate Peer Action Plan, report from Councillor Jones, Leader of the Council, Ian Duke, the Chief Executive, and Siraj Chowdhury, Head of Governance, People and Performance. Please, can you kindly present the report to the Commission?
Thank you, Chair. The LGA's Corporate Peer Challenge is the local government sector's leading process for continuous improvement. In front of us today is the Council's position statement ahead of the challenge, the final feedback report from the Corporate Peer Challenge team, and the draft action plan Cabinet will be considering to take forward those recommendations within the report that remain relevant. Members have also separately received communication between the Council and the LGA about the process, following questions raised by members at a previous meeting of OSC. We touched on the CPC at full council last week, and it feels appropriate to start by picking up on some of the comments made at the meeting on the assumption that we may hear some of the same lines again. It was my decision, Chair, to request a corporate peer challenge. I had agreed that we would do this with the Chief Executive earlier in my tenure as leader, and it would have happened sooner, but with the change of Chief Executives, I wanted to give our new one some opportunity to settle in before starting the process. I would point out as well that I am the first leader of CBC to bring in a CPC team. In doing so, I agreed to include an opposition peer as part of the CPC team. Whilst considered best practice, I was under no compulsion to do so. I also agreed to include the Leader of the Opposition in key sessions, notably the feedback session at the end of the visit, when the initial findings were being shared for the first time. So, Despite comments that have been made of late, I am open to the idea that, like any other council, we will have areas for improvement. After all, that is the very idea of the CPC. But I make no apology for promoting what the council does well, as you know. That is something to be proud of, and it gives us a chance to speak up for our town. And within the CPC report, there is a significant amount to be proud of. In 5.1 of the covering report, we pull out just those mentioned in the executive summary, which you will be relieved that I'm not going to read out. But in short, the report shows that this is a council that delivers for its residents and its town, despite the real challenges being faced. First and foremost, that is how I believe our residents judge success. But the CPC is about improvement, and as you will have seen in the report, there are 10 recommendations as set out in 5.2. For 2 of those recommendations, 6 and 7, events have somewhat overtaken them. Item 6 relates to the setting of a balanced budget, which was achieved within the timeframes. The CPC took place during a critical phase of the budget process, which, as members will recall, was challenging in scale, but was also undertaken later following the July election and late settlement announcements. Likewise, item 7 about undertaking a mock inspection of housing, that was overtaken by the real thing. The regulator is due to announce its findings in the coming weeks, and I would anticipate this coming to scrutiny in the autumn. With some aspects of Recommendation 8, it seems the CPC team did not fully understand where we were with the housing waiting list and private sector landlords. We wrote with factual information on these points following the first draft, but unfortunately the CPC team decided not to update those points. Nonetheless, the council continues its work in these areas, is currently updating its housing policies and is developing the application of the service charge as set out in the last budget. The action plan therefore speaks in the main to the remaining 7 recommendations, and whilst there was a delay in arriving at the final report, for reasons I'm sure we'll get into, we have been far from idle. Appendix 6 shows the progress made to date. Between Appendix C and the action plan, I believe we are demonstrating our commitment to the CPC process and to continuous improvement. But I'm also keen to hear the Commission's reflections and thoughts on what else we could be doing to respond to the recommendations. Before handing over, I've asked Siraj to just quickly talk through the CPC approach as background. Not only has Siraj been party to this process, but he's also been on the other side, so understands what this LGA is seeking to achieve with this process. So I, along with Siraj and Ian, Chair, would then be happy to receive comments and any questions that the Commission might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and over to Siraj.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michael. So the report sets out what a CPC, a corporate peer challenge is, and what the purpose of it is and what's involved. What I was just going to talk about was a little bit about what a peer team actually does and the kind of experience that they have. As Michael mentioned, I've served on a few peer teams and visited other councils and done a similar exercise and kind of been party to the kind of LGA training in terms of how to approach a peer challenge and how to interact with the personnel at the council that you're visiting. So kind of some weeks in advance, as you can imagine, the peer team, once it's been selected, they get a whole host of documents. So they get a suite of documents shared from the council. The position statement is appended to the report, so you can see what that looks like. And that being the main one, kind of highlighting the council's where it sees itself, its strengths, its weaknesses, areas that the council would like the peer team possibly to explore in more detail. So that's a real kind of solid document to give the peer team an idea of kind of how the council feels about itself and what the issues might be. But as I said, they then have several weeks of kind of going through those documents, things like all the corporate policies and financial strategy, those sorts of things, local plan they would have looked at in our case, to kind of get an idea of what's happening in the borough. So they've got a lot to digest. And then what they then do is a series of meetings in the lead up to the on-site visit. So I believe, Michael, you met with the lead political peer, and I think Ian, as chief exec, met the lead the lead peer, the team leader, so the chief exec who served on that peer team. And that's really to have those initial conversations, again, to understand where the council's at, what kind of themes might be coming through. So, and then they then feed that back to the rest of the peer team, who meet probably a few times before the site visit. And as you know, the site visit took place for 3 days in December last year. So the team came through. They spent most of the time meeting with people. So they met chief exec, heads of service, the Section 151 officer who's just walked in, and myself as monitoring officer, as well as all the heads of services. They met Michael as leader, various cabinet portfolio holders, and the leader of the opposition. And again, lots of personnel from across the organisation, as well as external partners as well. Some of our external stakeholders. So there are a lot of meetings packed into probably the first 2 days. And then on the third day, they're kind of collating their ideas and their presentation, which they presented on the final third day. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of it's quite an intense, they're long, intense days, those days that they're on site, and they're being kind of fed a lot of information. So just to give you an idea of the LGA's kind of core principles around peer review programs, effectively they've got three real principles. The first one is that the peer team that are coming, they're a critical friend. So they're coming, they've been selected to be on the peer team as senior people from local government. So they're from councils, so they understand the pressures and the challenges that local authorities face, and they're selected for their various skills and expertise. They could be from a range of disciplines and from different councils as well. So the idea is that they bring they bring innovation and kind of experience and knowledge and best practice. So that's the kind of critical friend concept. The second one is that the findings of their kind of investigations, their inquiries, and eventually their recommendations, which Michael referred to, they should be based on evidence. So the idea is that they spend their time looking at what we've given them in terms of documentation, gathering the evidence that they've built, talking to people, and identify issues and themes, and convert those, hopefully, into recommendations and suggestions on how we can improve. So when they do identify themes, issues that they want to explore, the idea is that they speak to another person, or they corroborate that evidence by they could ask the council, could we have more information? They could ask us, could you clarify this? Or they could speak to other people. So if they've heard something at management level, they might speak to the staff group, for example. They met a staff focus group. They could speak to them to try and see if those themes kind of follow through. So the idea is that it's an evidence-based exercise. The third kind of core principle is that there are no real surprises. So I think the idea is that there's a lot of dialogue during the process. So the leader and the chief exec meet with the peer team lead kind of at the end of each day or at the beginning of each day, and there are kind of updates in terms of themes that are coming through, things that they're finding, and any concerns that they may have. So the idea is that by the time you get to the final presentation on day 3, there shouldn't really be any surprises in terms of what they're recommending and what they've found. So those are generally the core principles that the LGR promote, and that most teams, peer teams that are sent out to do these challenges, that's generally the guiding principles. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of where the peer team comes from when they arrive on site. Thanks.
Thank you both for your presentation, and I'll open this up now. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Ayling?
Yeah, thank you. I've read in the report on page 78 that they'd like to strengthen the impact and effectiveness of OFC and improve, for example, the feedback loop between OSC and Cabinet. I just wondered how that they could improve on the impact and the effectiveness and improve the link between OSC and Cabinet, as the Chair gives a report to Cabinet after every OSC meeting. I just wondered where they thought the improvement could be, or what improvements they recommended. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this was kind of one of the observations, I guess, from the peer challenge, and we it's mentioned in the report that we went back with feedback, I guess, on their feedback on the final report, and this is one of the things that we did comment on, that we did explain thoroughly our process of, as you've just described, that the chair of OSC comes to Cabinet, feeds back that information. So we did describe that. I mean, the only thing I can think is that it's not necessarily a process that, or a method that's followed at every council, but I think we were able to explain how we do it and how it's effective. But nonetheless, that was one of their observations. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think that the way we do scrutiny at Crawley is not kind of the usual method in terms of that pre-decision kind of scrutiny. So when it comes in, it's quite different. But I think, in a way, this is an opportunity for the Commission to have a think on the back of it, of what it looks like from your perspective and what you might want to feedback. But when you go to other councils, rather than for the majority watching the reports coming through and then feeding through to every report, that scrutiny will sometimes have a much larger work programme of its own than is done here, and therefore it's going to Cabinet not necessarily with recommendations on a Cabinet report, but its own recommendations. So I think you've got people coming from councils that run it in a different way, and therefore it might have seemed slightly at odds with kind of what they're used to. But part of the problem when we get the report is we don't really get to interrogate and understand exactly where they're coming from. We get the report.
So they didn't give any recommendation on how that could be improved then? Okay.
Okay, Councillor Lanza.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to Leader and officers for presenting this report. I think it is commendable that we asked for a CPC, a corporate peer challenge, to occur, although there is a kind of national expectation that we should do so, I believe, every 5 years. And it's good also that one of the peers was from an opposition political party, and that our own opposition leader was able to take part in some of the sessions. And there is a lot of good news in this independent corporate peer challenge. I've undertaken something similar myself, so I understand their efforts to be as objective as possible. There's a lot of good news in there. I'll just pick out a few things. Our efforts on water neutrality to enable house building despite the surprise of that restriction coming through, and the preparation of our local plan. I just had a few questions. So on Appendix C, page 15, there's a paragraph here which kind of stands out because I don't detect it in the rest of the report, and it says leadership. As noted above, whilst responding to housing challenges is noted by both the political and officer leadership as the council's top priority, the peer team identified that despite this context, it appears that all activity and service delivery is a priority which means that nothing is prioritised. I wonder, is that a kind of loose statement, so as to speak, because I don't pick up that theme elsewhere in the report necessarily. And the other point I wanted to refer to, again on Appendix C, page 28, there's a reference to us only having 5 units of private sector housing available, so kind of collaboration with the private sector in terms of meeting housing need. And of course, recommendation 8, as the report notes, we fed back to the review team some matters of fact, I believe, which weren't necessarily incorporated. I don't know if the lead or any of the officers would like to take the opportunity to give a bit more detail in what is, after all, a public meeting in terms of how recommendation 8 implies that we could do more in the field of working with the private sector to alleviate the housing crisis, and just take the opportunity to comment on some of those areas where we fed back, but the information wasn't subsequently put in the report by the review team. Thank you.
There were 2 parts to that, so I don't know if you want to take them separately. The question on the loose comment, possibly, and then the comment on the use of and working with the private sector. That's certainly something we covered, I think, extensively when we had the pre-meet as well. Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the comment about the private sector housing, I think the officers will be able to say more on that. Although, as has been alluded to earlier, there were several things that were said in relation to housing that we questioned, and it didn't seem to provoke a revision, which is possibly unfortunate. But just to address the points you made, Councillor Lanza, initially, I'm almost 100% certain that West Sussex County Council is probably overdue for its next peer challenge. It's definitely been 5 years since it last had one, so you might want to have a word, Bob, with the powers that be and brush up there. But in terms of the issue about and the statement about priorities, well, it's their wording. We absolutely do have priorities, and certainly as far as housing is concerned and our housing challenges, we've definitely got what is pretty much a worked out strategy and programme for what we would like to see coming forward in that regard. But in terms of the private sector housing, I'll pass over to one of the officers to answer.
Thank you. So, yeah, we wrote back on the private sector, and I think, again, the slight difficulty is we've not been able to have a conversation to understand precisely what they're getting at. The difficulty with the recommendations against that is I'm not sure the 2 read across. We do an awful lot of work with the private rented sector. So members will be aware of the Crawley Deposit Scheme, the work that we've done to get people out of TA. If we think about the Chigossin events of last year, those that we were able to help and support to get was very much through the private rented sector. Unfortunately, because of the availability, we're having to look out of borough. It's quite a turnaround that Crawley was placing in London in order to be able to access that as a for instance. But I think what this is specifically looking at is the leasing, and our understanding is that relates to a model in Ipswich where they offer to become a letting agent essentially for properties in the private rented sector, so they take on the burden of the finding and the management, etc., etc. It's a model I have a little bit of experience in Hounslow. Now that's a model that we have looked at in the past, but at that time it didn't work for us. But given where we are with the scale, it's something that Ben Huck, as the new head of strategic housing, is looking into, along with a range of other options. So it's a case of probably wasn't as accurate in the reflection, I think, but I think they were trying to get at a particular type of scheme that we are looking at.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't know how much to and fro there's been with the review team in terms of elaborating on their reasoning behind the recommendation, because you said you think it applies, potentially to a specific scheme that's used elsewhere. But could there be more to it than that, which might cause us to leave the recommendation on the books, to find out more about it rather than discarding it?
Absolutely. I mean, in no way are we discarding it. All we're saying is we didn't recognise the figure against the recommendation, but as I say, we are looking at that, and hope they will be. I think the one thing that's in the report that we haven't mentioned so far is that there will be a revisit and contact in the coming months to set that up, so it gives us an opportunity to clarify.
Does that answer everything? Yeah. Are there any other questions from councillors? Councillor Lunnan?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to say that I'm very glad the CBC has gone through this process, and also glad with the outcome. I think broadly, I agree with Councillor Jones on what this is, which is a good, competent council that's driving forward in difficult times, where the staff are valued and proud to work for us. And I'm also glad that we've taken the opportunity on board to try and improve. Now, obviously, my following comments are going to focus on the bits where I might look for the improvement. So I just want to caveat that at the start and say, overall, I think this is pretty much a good report. So I just want to very quickly touch on as well, it's now clear why it took so long for the report to get to this stage, and I don't particularly have any problem with it, but I would say maybe in future, councillors could be engaged throughout that time for us to know that this is going on. And just, I understand this is unprecedented that we've gone through a corporate peer challenge, but just keeping us updated that the report is underway and there's just some challenges on technical accuracy would have been useful to keep us sort of placated. I'm not going to go through every recommendation line by line, you'll be glad to hear, but I did want to pick up on some, notably the governance arrangements, particularly as I'm the chair of governance, but I'll start with the non-governance arrangements. And firstly, again, I want to agree with the council's response to recommendations, particularly recommendation 6, but also 7 and 8. I think the budget process was carried out pretty openly with significant ability for councillors from all sides to input. So actually, I think the council handled that very well, considering the challenges that were placed on us. So I don't think we need to particularly learn any lessons from that. I think other councils could maybe learn from what we did on that, sort of how you get significant member engagement in that process. And also, I think the housing recommendations, I think, we've already got plans in place for those. So I just want to cover off some of the bits on governance. Notably, I'm going to refer to Appendix C and particularly our actions on them, and so I'm going to start with 3.1, which says we're going to conduct a detailed analysis of the good practices and areas which could be improved within CBC's governance. That's apparently being completed by Siraj. Quite happy with that, but I would have thought that maybe that review could go to governance, because members might also see some of the things that you've pulled out as good practice from other councils that might not be effective or worthwhile at Crawley Borough Council, and come to a different opinion on that. So I think it'd be useful for that to come to governance at a point in the future, just to sort of see what other good practice we could embody, or why we shouldn't. We've already got good practice. I also wondered on 3.4, we talk about moving away from cabinet portfolio members sitting on the regulatory committees. I wondered whether that could be put into the constitution possibly as well, sort of make that a bit more formal rather than an informal element to it, if we're happy to do that going forward. And I have no issue with that being a policy that we carry out. Specifically on the regulatory committees, I should make clear. I also there was a bit in the written report that I have now lost, that was on the arrangements of the officers and their reviews of corporate. I'm just trying to find the wording and just understand what we've done about it, because it wasn't touched on in our response. Hold on, sorry. Here we go. It's the view of the peer team that the officer governance structure is set up to monitor and aid the delivery of corporate programmes and projects, along with the transformation programme, may be too complex to be effective and agile, and may benefit from a review and rationalisation. And I just wondered, that wasn't touched on in the council's action plan, so I just wondered if I could get a sort of a brief update on that. And then finally, just on member development, I'm very much in support of getting some more member development, and I think, and I'm going to, this might be an example tonight, I would be interested to know why members sometimes feel that they're not comfortable raising questions or asking questions at scrutiny sessions. At the moment, we've had, I think, myself, Councillor Lanzer and Councillor Ayling, and there's obviously 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 councillors on this committee, 12 councillors on this committee. And I think that is something, you know, if you've got more councillors being comfortable engaging in these topics, which isn't necessarily covered off in our action plan. I'm not saying the action plan isn't good, but I just think the, you know, wanting councillors to speak more, obviously I'm slightly self-interested in that, but I just think getting more councillors engaged on issues would help us, especially in the scrutiny and commission overview and scrutiny aspect. So I'd be interested if that could be somehow included in our action plan as well. That's it for my questions, Chair.
Okay, I think they identified 4 elements there. Siraj, do you want to talk first on, I think it was 3.1 that was mentioned, and then open up elsewhere?
Do you remember what what was that? The analysis, the governance. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to bring that to governance committee. It was more that and you'll have seen the response that we sent back to the original feedback report. So, in order to respond, we had to carry out basically an effective analysis. But yeah, happy to run that to see if there's learning from that.
In terms of the Constitution, I think you're well placed to take that forward. So I will leave you to have those conversations. The office governance, yeah, that was another one that kind of surprised us. So what we sent through was a structure chart, and a lot of the things on there are things like partnerships, which we don't have much choice about, but also activity and mechanisms rather than, and we never got an opportunity to talk them through it. And it kind of then slightly contradicted one of the points in the report that said, actually, team were impressed by what we were able to deliver given the pressure that we were under at the same time. And my argument was in part that was that structure. But it's one that we continue to focus on. So it's not in there, but we change it on a regular basis. If things start to not work or we want to do it in a different way, we adapt it. So rather than having it in as specific action where we might kind of do a more formalised report, because it is quite agile, actually it changes over time. As officers, we'll just continue to review it almost on a twice a year to make sure that it's fit for purpose.
Just for the Chief Exec, the first point about councillors being informed about this process, I'm hoping you'll just say, yes, that's a good idea.
It is a good idea. And well, no, so I think, look, just a reflection on that one, I guess. We didn't know it was going to take that long, I think is one of the things to say. So, you know, there were delays on both sides. It was as LGR was kicking off, so and including the LGR, we were being pulled in different directions at the same time. So yeah, I recognise the communication should have been better. I did keep the 2 leaders, but it should have been to all really. So I take that on board.
Councillor Jones, did you have a comeback?
Yeah, just on a few of the points there, Chair, and also Councillor Lunnon. Certainly in the future we'll try and keep members updated. As the Chief Executive said, the worst, the events, dear boy, events, things arose which meant that perhaps this didn't run as quickly or as smoothly as we'd all have liked it to have been done in terms of actually moving the process forward once we got to this point. But I quite welcome your budget comments. I think I'm of the view that it was a robust process and a decent discussion was had. In terms of members' development, I mean, I think the point about development was one we raised with the CPC before they came, and the impact of member turnover where we've lost some very experienced members in a relatively short time should not be dismissed lightly, even if some of the new members are very talented in their own rights, and we recognise that. And we won't change people overnight, but if people have got sort of training needs, we've always tried to be a council that nurtures that and encourages people to to get that development. In terms of the regulatory point, it's an interesting point you raise because in terms of writing it into the Constitution, I mean, obviously that would be the only way to stop it. But I mean, one of the reasons this year that we took steps on that was that it was something that was commented on within the CPC, but it was more suggested it was good practice than it was essential. I think. I mean, let's be clear. The council wasn't doing anything wrong before if the cabinet member was sitting on the committee, and indeed even now the cabinet member will still be able to attend and express their view at the regulatory committee that they're responsible for, which is absolutely right. I think what potentially may be gained from writing it into the Constitution, I think I'd want to sort of consider further, but on that basis, those would be my thoughts.
Okay, I've got a couple of people that want to speak. Are you coming back as well, Councillor Lanza? Yeah. Could I just make a couple of observations myself quickly as well? And at risk of echoing the council leader, I think your comments were absolutely pertinent about the budget strategy. And as councillors and being on the audit committee as well, we were led through step by step and given what I think, with it will be compared to some members on the council, a relatively limited financial background, but I think we were given lots and lots of detailed information, and there was the online training sessions, the options were all put there. And I think that's somewhere that whilst it was mentioned in I think point 6, actually the council did a very, very good job on that. In terms of member development, I was pleased to see that there, and I hope that opportunities for conferences and the like run by the Local Government Association might be highlighted, that we could possibly put ourselves forward, self-nominate, but if there's a list or a way to make those available, that would be very helpful. So I've got 3 people now who want to contribute, Councillor Hellier and then Councillor Ramsey and then back to Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lunnan, because for mentioning the points, because I actually mentioned the points you raised and the points that Councillor Lanza raised at our pre-meeting. So it shows that some of us are thinking along the same lines. But a further question that I've got, and it talks about things like the IT manual collection of data that we've actually got, and that our performance management may need to be refreshed. And I just wondered, are we going to actually change some of these outcomes given the strategic sort of review that we're actually having in terms of the restructuring and everything else? Is it actually going to, from the peer challenge, actually going to change some of our priorities moving forward?
So I think, the context, if we just go back to where we were in December, a really difficult time, but not knowing that we weren't going to exist as a council by March 2028. It's amazing just how far the context has moved, really. So the review that's kind of taking place on the back of that is recognising that it is going to be a very different time, where we still need to deliver for residents. We need to still deliver on some of the key objectives that we've been set as officers by the administration. We need to bring one council to an end. We need to be party to setting up another council. And we need to provide a legacy, I think, that all members would want, in terms of marking when we were here. And you think that is on top of, and I think this comes back, you mentioned it earlier, Councillor Lanza, I think, about the prioritisation. I think what the members just saw was the sheer amount that was being done, really. I think that's really the comment that they were trying to get at. It was the scale of delivery in the context of real strategic challenges. So that when you put all that together, it won't all hold for the next, well, we're getting on for 2.5 years now, but let's say 3. And I think that's what the corporate plan seeks, to bring some clarity for all about what it is that we can do during that time. But of course, we will use that then opportunity to address what's been kind of highlighted in terms of, you know, KPIs, etc., in terms of that refresh. So it's a fairly significant review. Yeah.
Did you have a supplementary? Okay, Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I echo what others have said. I'm really happy that we've gone through this process, and even though there was a delay in publishing the report, it's good that actually quite a lot of progress seems to be made in terms of, you know, getting the action plan moving forward. And yeah, just I have a few kind of questions which kind of all hit on the same theme about those actions in the action plan. There's just a few that jump out at me as it's not obvious how we would judge that they've actually been completed. So things like encouraging members to go to events. I mean, I'd hope that would always be in progress, I guess. Like, I don't think you ever say you've completed that. And I'm not sure what, you know, consider the governance comments means. Is that part of a wider review, or because I know it's not been started, so like I assume you have actually like read them and considered them in like the truest sense, in that you've actually read and considered them. But what does that actually mean going forward? And then I guess finally in 4.9 it says the team is going to revisit in November, so obviously there will be some kind of, you know, progress update at that point, but a lot of the actions have a completion date of kind of March 26, you know, kind of vaguely, so I'm just wondering, is like beyond November, for those actions that are going to be completed beyond November, is there a plan in place to make sure that we don't kind of lose track of those items? Like, will this report come back to OSC, or, you know, like, is there a mechanism in place, basically? Thanks.
Who would like to take that one?
And that's for the Commission to decide, really, if it's something that you would like brought back in terms of that's within your gift.
No, that's fair enough. But in terms of, sorry, back to like some of the specific earlier questions. So consider the governance comments. What does that mean? How will we know when you've considered them, I guess? Because at the moment, I would argue that's either completed because it's so simple, or yeah, there's something else going on there. It's a 3 point, which one is it? 3.5 that I'm thinking of.
So I think I spoke to that one earlier. That's the internal officer governance. So it's something that we will do on a regular basis as we go through. So would you and other look at it as officers, and we can include that within the feedback that comes through. But that won't be a one-off. It's something we do regularly.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
I mean, there was something you mentioned about the revisiting the priorities, and there was a lot of nodding. Unfortunately, I was only looking in this direction at that moment.
I think there was a lot of nodding about bringing it back to OSC, and I kind of think that may end up being the appropriate forum for making sure progress is ensured beyond November. But obviously, I guess that's for the
and would the meeting? Thank you very much for this. Be happy if we put down that the OSC would like an update to come to us after that November meeting, with an officer's coming on. Sorry. After the meeting, so or March. What's the view here? Sorry, do you have a?
Chair, I'm as happy for you to call us to talk about this as often as you think would be useful. But in terms of the visit from the CPC team in November, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, that is just a general catch-up. That's there to see that the plan's in place and it's on course to addressing the points that they've made. I think it will, in terms of if you want to ask us how that's going and what feedback we've had from them, obviously it'll be more constructive to do that after we've had it. So, but if you'd like to put something in, we will work to that, certainly, I think.
So I think we can expect a bit of a written, I think if I understand it, as an update report from the peer review team. So so it will be after. So it probably speaks to somewhere between January and March, however you fit in.
Sorry, that was on the paper that you handed to me. But yes, that we get some feedback, a schedule to be updated in conjunction with the officers. But if we've had this discussion now, we can make sure it's in the minutes and then we're there. Are you okay there, Councillor Lands?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, on that point, I mean, I think we need to be careful, as you have been, in considering the frequency. I mean, I think annual wouldn't be enough because, as it were, there aren't that many years left, are there, if you see what I mean? So, so probably a little bit more frequently.
Microphone.
Yeah, I wanted to come back on 3.4, recommendation 3.4 on governance, which I think Councillor Lunnan introduced and the leader responded to. I mean, I have spoken on this at full council before about cabinet members sitting on regulatory committees, and I wouldn't go as far as embedding it in the constitution because I think that would unduly fetter the discretion of the leader. I really wouldn't. But I can think, I mean, the leader within his powers has shown a readiness as appropriate to switch people in and out of committees. It's quite noticeable, and there can be all sorts of good reasons for that: absences, illness, potential conflict of interest, maintenance of an appropriate attendance at a committee. So I wouldn't want to lose that kind of discretion there at all. But equally, I mentioned a question I put some years ago at full council along the lines of the cabinet member for planning and economic development. And incidentally, that's one of the few cabinet members whose title hasn't changed since we introduced the cabinet system. Just as I mentioned that as an aside, all sorts of other ones have. But if you've got a major town centre development, which is a matter of cabinet policy, and that individual sits on the planning committee, it might be difficult for members of the public to imagine that cabinet member could conceivably vote against the planning application at the planning committee when it's a matter of cabinet policy. So that might be an example where they shouldn't be sitting for that particular item, even if they might be a member of the committee for other items. Thank you.
Is there anyone to respond on that?
Difficult to add much more than what I said earlier on, Chair, to be honest. But Councillor Lanza's points are taken.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 81 of Appendix C, item 5, 5.4, just one of the remarks is there's a key focus for the financial and management planning system is the finance system needs replacing for a modern approach to the management system. I just wanted to ask if this is something we're looking at replacing, and obviously that's going to help with financial management. Is that something we're actually looking at replacing the financial system?
It's one that is a little challenge. So it's one of the systems that we had on our list going through. But it's again within the context of us not being here in 2.5 years' time, and how much money are you willing to throw at a new system and the transformation that's required to deliver that, given that context. So it's a live conversation at the moment as to some midway. Done the same on the HR systems as well, where we've done a smaller upgrade in the middle of doing a smaller upgrade to our systems than we wanted to as an organisation, because you can't really justify either the expense or kind of the time it takes to do the change given the context. So we're trying to get that balance right.
I think I'll say as chair, it's something that Ian has said, that it's probably worth us never forgetting the scale of the challenges that we are facing as a council at the moment, and the number and volume of those, particularly the way we've been hit with the housing problems and difficulties and challenges, particularly here in Crawley. I mean, obviously it's a national problem, but it does hit us very, very hard. But the local government reform is having an immense effect, and it is the volume of strategic priorities. And I think we have to continue to make sure that we work together to meet those as well as possible. Are there any other questions, or are we getting close to a point where we can move on? Okay. I'd say now that all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I would absolutely like to thank the officers for the report, the presentations, the comments and the feedback. The recommendation is that this commission receives the report and draft action plan and decides what are recommendations, if there are any others that we wish to make to Cabinet. I mean, we've got some that will be taken forward from this meeting. But if there's any others, then I would ask that the Vice Chair second this. Councillor Hellier, can you please second the report?
Yes, I second that.
Okay. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. Right. We move on to HASC now. And the last meeting of HASC took place on the 25th of June. Councillor Khan, could we please have your update to the Commission? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I will be pleased to present this brief update of what's been going on at HASC. So the first item I want to highlight is the business planning group membership. So as set out in the County Council Constitution, each scrutiny committee must set up a business planning group to oversee the committee's work programme and prioritise issues for consideration and debate. So the committee membership had to be agreed and decided at the last meeting. So, and the next item I want to highlight is the update on the delivery of the two-tier adult social care improvement programme, which is something I have talked a lot about. So just a bit of background about this. Scrutiny of this programme has been a priority for the Health Committee, and this programme is designed to assist the delivery of adult social care, of the social care strategy and preparation for the Care Quality Commission. So the focus is of the scrutiny for this time was obviously how well the programme has supported delivery, what ongoing improvement activities will be required beyond June 2025, and the lessons learned from the programme and the identification of the next steps of the outcomes of the assurance process and how national initiatives will impact on the future adult social care service provision, and whether further scrutiny of the programme or specific ongoing elements of it will add value. So that's an update on that. And then the last item I want to highlight for the committee is the Q4 performance and resources report. So the quarterly performance resources report is the Council's reporting mechanism for corporate performance, finance and savings delivery. So the latest update on this is of the 7 performance measures that are being calculated, 57% are reporting as green and 0 as amber, and 43% as red. The number of red related key performance indicators has remained the same since last quarter, and the 2024-25 financial outturn position for the adult social services portfolio is a overspend of 19 million, an increase of and that has been increased since last year when compared to December. So that's all. That's the main stuff covered for the last meeting. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. So I will just have a run through of the items so far. I will start by stating that the OSC is currently due to receive a report on a petition that is currently online regarding the Tilgate Park mural. It will be over the signature threshold within the Constitution, so a report will be coming to OSC, and that's looking like it's coming to the next meeting. Also, there is the usual Cabinet reports, and currently there are 7 reports heading to Cabinet on the 3rd of September. 6 of these have already been referred to OSC, so I'll list those now. We have Crawley Homes Complaints Performance and Service Improvement Plan. We had that last year, and that is now the annual report that comes through. So that's the Crawley Homes Complaints Performance and Improvement Plan. Crawley Homes Domestic Abuse Policy. We then have 3 finance reports: the Budget Monitoring Quarter 1, Financial Outturn Quarter 4, Treasury Management Outturn, and the report that was mentioned at the beginning of tonight's meeting, Disposal of a Council-Owned Property, which is a subsequent deferral, so that is also due. The only other report from that list that is heading to Cabinet, which has not been referred, is the Crawley Homes Mutual Exchange Policy, unless you want that one.
Okay. I think we have a fairly hefty agenda already. I don't know what the views of the OSC are, but my feeling would be, unless there's a strong reason, we stick with what we've got. Okay, so we'll stick with what we have at the moment. Thank you. Okay, we now come to the Part B exempt report. This is the confidential section of the meeting. Therefore, under Section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of the Schedule 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraph specified against the item. The recording and live stream will now finish, so I wish to thank anyone here who's been watching for watching.